Okay, so good morning, everybody. You are very welcome to this morning's event, Digital Transformation and the Sector. My name's Emily Nelson. I'm the European Programs Manager at The Wheel, and I will be your MC today. I'm joined by a bunch of fabulous guest speakers who I will introduce momentarily, but first I just want to go through some quick Zoom housekeeping. So first, I'm going to ask for the standard Zoom consideration of keeping yourself muted when appropriate to avoid background noise. You'll note that we are recording today's session, so if you don't want to appear in said recording, feel free to keep your camera switched off. My colleague Christina is providing tech support today, so if you have any Zoom issues, send her a message in the chat and she'll do her best to sort you out. You can also use the chat to say hello and where you're joining us from today. And then in terms of follow-up, you will receive the recording, all the slides, and other resources from today's session in an email that will go out later this week. So that is it on the housekeeping. And now I will walk you through the agenda and what you can expect from today. So our Skills Development Senior Manager, Mairead O'Connor, is going to kick things off with a welcome and a bit of context setting for why we're here today. Then I'm going to take you through the results of our Driving Digital Inclusion consultation. Mairead is going to walk us through digital skills needs for the sector. And then we'll hear from Liz Kelly, who is the Deputy CEO and Senior Development Manager of Include, on the do's and don'ts of digitalization, learnings from the sector. We'll then have an opportunity for a question and answer session before hearing from Dola Toomey from the Sexual Violence Centre in Cork about her organization's digitalization journey. Then my colleague Lauren, who is our programs manager here at The Wheel, is going to talk about digital funding for the sector through the Training Links program. And then my colleague Christina, who's our EU programs manager or officer at The Wheel, will talk about EU funding for digitalization through and supports through our Access Europe program. And then we'll have another opportunity for Q&A. So please feel free to put any questions that you have for the speakers in the chat throughout the morning, and then we can address them during those Q&A sessions. So that is the agenda for the day. And now I'm going to hand over to Mairead to kick us off.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you all on Zoom this morning. This session is the last in our three-part series of events looking at digital inclusion and digital transformation. I'm going to have a problem with that word throughout in Ireland's community and voluntary sector. And the events are part of the Wheel's Digital Transformation for Thriving Communities project, which is generously funded by the European Citizen Action Service. That's a Brussels-based non-profit organisation that defends EU rights and promotes digital democracy and open decision-making in the EU. By bridging digital divides and empowering Irish civil society, the project aims to foster a more inclusive and digitally adept society, ensuring that no one is left behind in the digital transformation journey. So many digitals. In that wider European context, we are in the middle of a decade of transformation as well, which is known as the EU's Digital 2030 agenda. There's a huge focus on digital transformation at a policy and a practice level across the EU institutions, and today's event is obviously a reflection of that. So why is digital transformation a priority for us, the Wheel, and our members? Well, I suppose digital technology is obviously changing all of our lives in every aspect. We know this, we're living it every day. And I think even in more recent times, it feels like the pace of that change is only increasing. We have advancements in AI technologies dominating headlines everywhere, every day. So it's hard to get away from it. By 2030, according to the World Economic Forum, 9 out of 10 jobs will require digital skills. So the transformation is already an inevitability, whether you're a small community group or you're a large national charity. Every organization, even if you're only dipping your toes in the water, is already digital. We're communicating with each other online, we're meeting online, we're reporting to our funders through digital portals, we do our banking online. Opting out for the majority is just not an option. And so as you've heard at the consultation events last week that Emily mentioned, the scope and the potential of digital to support us to achieve our missions more effectively is impressive. Good digital systems built with our organisation's needs in mind can help us and our teams to spend more time on the things that matter, on human relationships, on more strategic conversations. While our digital systems can support us to spend less time on admin, harvest better data, make more informed decisions, and reach a wider audience. There is a but, though, and it's a pretty big one. And I think it lurks in the background when we're thinking about engaging with digital in our organizations, and it can be part of the hesitation on many of our parts. And that is the digital divide. In many ways, the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the opportunities of a rapid digitalization, but also the most significant challenges, from social exclusion and skills gaps to the lack of access to broadband and basic digital tools. This is especially the case for communities that are already marginalized and disadvantaged. In fact, one of the difficult lessons of the pandemic was the inherent risk that the more marginalized within our communities will be left behind once again, excluded from the opportunities that the digital age presents if we don't do something about it. The government's digital inclusion roadmap was published last year, and it states meaningful digital inclusion is an important element of social inclusion and is required to achieve an equitable participation in the digital society. So we're also aware that while the benefits of digitalization of society are clear, alongside that digital divide issue, there are also some very negative consequences of how we're using the digital technologies that we have access to. So whether that's the kind of disinformation that we're seeing more and more of, flooding the online space, to youth mental health crises that are being blamed at least somewhat on the rise of these tools and social media, to bot manipulated elections, which is very much in the headlines at the moment, or crimes like child exploitation and cybercrime. The historian Melvin Kranzenberg set it out in his first law of technology when he said, technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. So as a community and voluntary sector led by our values, if we are to serve our communities effectively, we must engage with the digitalization agenda. It's, as I said, an inevitability. And we must be pivotal in advocating for and facilitating an inclusive society-wide digital transformation. So the challenges to this inclusive transformation are great, and they cut across all sections of society on a number of fronts. According to the European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training, CEDEFOP, almost 38% of Irish adults have below basic digital skills, well behind both the EU average and the best performing countries in Europe. In the communities in which our organisations are based, lots of people are going to need continuing support in order to make that transition to a digitally literate future. And we'll also hear later that many of our staff and volunteers will need support to upskill in digital too. In a report published in 2021, the National Economic and Social Council outlined the 4 key dimensions of digital inclusion: connectivity, access to devices, skills, and the confidence to engage with information and communications technology. The report sets out significant challenges that exist in Ireland today under each of these headings, especially for those on lower incomes and living in rural areas, and in particular, older people. So Ireland's national ambition is to be a digital leader according to the government's Harnessing Digital strategy. By 2030, the Irish government wants to see 80% of adults with at least basic digital skills. Also, digital public services are a key theme of the EU's Digital 2030 agenda, and Ireland is slowly catching up in areas such as e-health. Again, as referenced in the government's digital inclusion roadmap, which was published last year, the ultimate goal is to make Ireland one of the most digitally inclusive states in the EU, that everyone should have the opportunity to use digital services, including digital public services, in a meaningful way. But we've quite a journey to go over the next 5 years if we're going to reach that ambitious goal. And our organisations, as I said, must play a key role as both advocates for and enablers of a progressive digital transformation agenda at the national level. And lots of Irish community and voluntary organisations are already doing just that. Probably lots of you on this call are already involved in that kind of activity. I spotted just last week that Uplift, the social change platform, held an event called the People's Inquiry on Big Tech Harms. So again, it was interesting that was held in the same week as Coimisiún na Meán published its online safety code for video sharing platforms. And it just demonstrates the potential for our sector to take a leadership role in the digital inclusion space. Organisations as diverse as Cybersafe Kids, Age Action, Spun Out, On Cusan, Include, who are here today, NALA, who've spoken at some of the other events we've held already last week, and Irish Rural Link, among many, many, many other organisations, are taking action to tackle digital exclusion in its various forms. As organisations too, we will need to respond to the digitalisation challenge internally. We're going to need to get our own processes, practices and approaches lined up with the opportunities of digital while mitigating the risks. If we're going to transform our work in an equitable and ethical way, then we need to be consciously digitally inclusive ourselves. So providing the tools and access for those that are excluded and designing our digital projects in a way that makes digital access possible and central for everyone. Cybersecurity is another area where organisations are likely to be spending increasing time and effort. It's probably on your own minds when you think about digital. And in order to prepare and become more cyber resilient, we need to engage with that in a meaningful way as well. And we need to be prepared for systems failures too. You know, a lot of us now are dependent on cloud-based systems, centralized systems. That's something we need to be more conscious of. Digital tools and know-how can help organisations in the sector to access new audiences, to increase our reach, to work smarter, to become more cyber resilient. And digital transformation can have positive impacts on lots of different areas of our work, from fundraising to HR to service delivery and collaboration. But we need to make sure that we're shaping the ways that these tools are used in alignment with our rights and values, rather than being shaped or indeed distorted in turn by them ourselves. And I suppose finally, I want to note that all of this requires time and resources. And that's a big challenge. To meet our commitments under the digital divide, Ireland has committed to supporting SMEs and micro businesses to digitalise through providing support such as the Digital Transition Fund. We need to see similar supports for our sector. And we've made this call very clearly in our pre-budget submission recently and in our just published election manifesto. We know that finding funding in time to consider this area is a big challenge for most organisations. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be here today to engage in this and helping us and your colleagues in the sector to take on this important strategic conversation. The final output of the project will be a report summarising the digitalisation barriers and opportunities that the sector faces and recommended actions for effectively supporting the digitalisation of Irish community and voluntary sector. The report will then form the basis for the Wheel to develop more dedicated trainings and resources on this important topic. Today's event will look at some of our initial findings based on the consultations conducted at the Driving Digital Inclusion workshops on the 16th and 23rd of October, and Emily will take us through that shortly. We'll also hear about issues relating to digital skills, as we've heard, and looking at how organisations have used digital to transform how they operate. And then finally, some sources of funding as well that will help us to look at digitalisation. The digitalisation transformation is a journey. Wherever you are on that journey yourself and your organisation, we hope that today's event will be inspiring and enlightening and may even provide you with some ideas for funding and action that will help you take your next step. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mairead. I think that was a really great encapsulation of how vital it is that our sector ensures an inclusive digital transformation, but also hopefully quite reassuring that we're all on this journey together and that there are lots of supports out there once you know where to look. So thank you very much for that, Mairead. So I am going to take us through the results of our Driving Digital Inclusion consultation. Okay. So as Mairead mentioned, today's event is the third and final event of our three-part series on digital transformation and inclusion for the sector. So our first two events were on the 16th and 23rd of October. And during both events, we carried out a short consultation with the attendees on their digitalization experience. So now I'm just going to give you an overview of some of our initial findings, and I'm sure a lot of it will sort of echo what Mairead's already said and will resonate with many of you here today. So we started both of the consultations with a short Menti poll with some simple yes or no questions. So the first question was, do you have a digital strategy for your organization? So as you can see here, of the 57 attendees who answered the poll, only 17 of them have a digital strategy in place. The next question that we asked was, do you feel there are digitalization supports for the community and voluntary sector? So across the two events, 55 people responded to that question, and the majority of them, 38 people, said that they were unsure because they're not aware of the available supports. And nobody said, yes, there are a lot of supports out there. So obviously there's a big piece of work to do around awareness raising about the supports out there for our sector to digitalize. So that's why we're here today. But there's also a lot of appetite to learn about what's out there, so that's encouraging. So the next part of the consultation took the form of breakout rooms, where we asked attendees 4 questions. So for each of those 4 questions, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I will share the top themes that emerged under each of them. So the first question was, what are the main barriers to digitalization? Though I don't think that there are any surprises here. So the top barrier was funding or lack thereof, and budget constraints. So that means lack of funding for digital tools, for software, for equipment and hardware, for licensing fees, and data management, because these things are often not funded by grants. So how do we fund digitalization? And then we have the skills gap that Murray mentioned in our sector and organizations. So a lot of people, and when I say people, I mean the people responding to the poll or the consultation, felt that their staff and volunteers lacked the necessary digital skill set or experience required to digitalize. So there's a need for accessible formal training that isn't overly complex. Then, of course, there is time and resources. So where do we find the time to do this training? And very importantly, who is going to manage or spearhead our digital strategies and stay on top of them? And that includes, delivering on all the other work we're doing. And so finally, there was fear and resistance to change came up as a big barrier. So there was a lot of fear around excluding people on this digitalization journey, and that included both staff and volunteers and community members and service users. And some of the resistance to change is also tied into fear, of course. So fear of the unknown, fear of taking risks, fear of making mistakes, especially in relation to things like data privacy and compliance. Okay, so take a look at the second question. So what are the priorities you have in ensuring that your digital strategy is inclusive? So for many of the attendees, it was really important that organizations acknowledge that different groups have different needs and that they should be consulted and involved in the organization's digitalization process. So there should be space for feedback and adjustments if things aren't working out. Essentially, it should be a human-centered approach and everybody should be part of this journey. In terms of building an empowerment, organizations want to ensure that they're helping people overcome their fears, as well as building people's confidence around their digital skills. And that it can actually be a fun process. So we should try to build confidence and skill sets organically as we involve and use different kind of incentives and motivators to get people to take part. Digital solutions need to be accessible. We have to consider things like language, reading and writing difficulties, visual and auditory challenges, among other things. And that also means things like avoiding jargon and using plain English on websites and other digital resources. And then organizations really stress that they want to partner with their peers to digitalize together and learn from and support each other. And later today, we're going to hear more about how organizations can do just that. Okay, so now on a more uplifting note, our third question was, do you see any opportunities in digitalization and how it could transform your work? So attendees said that digitalization would improve their service delivery. So for example, allowing beneficiaries to have 24/7 access to services, or automating certain internal administrative tasks, which would then free up staff and volunteer time to focus on other areas or do kind of value add tasks. Digitalization will expand organizations' reach and engagement. So for example, they could reach a wider audience through virtual events like this one that obviously extend beyond local or regional boundaries. They can move training online to make it more accessible for people with disabilities or even to accommodate inclement weather or, pandemics. Attendees said that digitalization could improve stakeholder engagement and enhance collaboration with other organizations and board members, and thus provide greater opportunities for networking. And then they also noted that digitalization will improve data collection and impact measurement by ensuring greater accuracy and transparency, and that it also provides an opportunity to innovate and look at emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. And finally, our last question was, what further supports do you need to progress or start your digitalization journey? And there's a lot of overlap here with the barriers question, but that makes sense. So first up, organizations need appropriate training and capacity building for their staff, their volunteers, and their community members. They also need funding to start or expand their digitalization process. And then hand in hand with funding goes access to software, hardware, and other digital solutions. But very importantly, using digital solutions in companies that align with our ethics and values in the community and voluntary sector, which can be quite challenging to find. And ultimately, what we all need in this sector is time. So carving out the time to know where to start with digitalization, and then once you have started, dedicating time to implementing and reviewing your digital strategy. So of course, there were a lot of other topics that came up under each of the 4 questions, but we don't have time to delve into the nitty-gritty of that today. So hopefully this just kind of gives you a flavor of what your peers in the sector are facing in terms of digitalizing their organizations and supporting their communities to do the same. So as Mairead mentioned, our next step at the wheel is to compile all of these findings into a report with recommendations for actions to better support our sector to implement and deliver effective and inclusive digital strategies. And then the findings from the consultation and this whole event series and project will not only inform the development of future trainings and resources for the sector, but it will also help us as the wheel to effectively advocate for our sector in this area. So once we have that report ready, we will be sure to circulate it to you all. And now I'm going to hand back over to Mairead, who's going to talk to us about digital skills for the sector.
Thanks, Emily. I'm just going to share my slides as well. Bear with me a moment. As was noted there on Emily's presentation, the area of training capacity building is one of the action steps that people want to see. They want to see more access to appropriate training. And I suppose that's what I'm going to be talking about over the next few minutes around, I suppose, how the national skills agenda and the skills profile in our sector intersects with this digital transformation area. So I suppose just to give you a brief introduction as to why I'm speaking on this today, in the wheel we have a team whose smiling faces you'll see in front of you there, who work on all areas of workforce development and capacity building. And we do that through a number of means. We deliver lots of training, and some of it I'll be pointing to later that has a relevance to this area around digital skills. We also provide funding for training networks, which you'll be hearing about specifically this afternoon from my colleague Lauren Carroll. We also develop policy and research. We have a leadership academy, and we provide advice and guidance as well. And I think, I suppose what I'm going to be speaking to is this research side and what we have learned, if you like, about the workforce, its skills needs, and in particular, this area of digital skills needs over the last short while. So just to zoom up, if you like, to the big picture first, and to take a look at the sector as a whole, the workforce and the profile of those of us who work in the sector currently. The community and voluntary sector is a large one. There are over 34,000 organisations right across the sector, this non-profit sector. Within the sector, there are over 1 million people who are volunteering regularly. They have skills needs. And of those, 76,000 are taking on that unpaid trustee or governance role within the organisation. So lots of responsibility and skills required there, and also a need for those governing volunteers, if you like, to take a leadership role in this space as well to drive digital change. In terms of employees, there are over 281,000 people who are paid to work in our sector. So it's a very large workforce. 1 in 8 of the general labour force actually works in our sector. And that is very significant in terms of, you know, again, the skills needs being met and recognised by the state. There is an income of over 19 billion per year controlled by the sector, and about half of that is fundraised income. And 1 in every 3 people who deliver public services in Ireland actually works for a charitable community or voluntary organisation. So again, very important when we think of what I referenced earlier, this drive for digital public services and the needs of those people to be able to keep on top of their digital skills and really kind of keep ahead of, if you like, this digital transformation agenda. So really important, significant workforce. In terms of where it's concentrated, you have people working right across all subsectors of the nonprofit sector, but there are particular concentrations in areas like social services, health, housing, etc. The sector employs more people than either agri-food or the hospitality sectors. So just to give you kind of a sense of the scale of what we're talking about here. When we look for evidence of the skill need in the sector, in particular around digital skills, we have a certain amount of information, but I would like us to have more. So it's an area that we would be interested in doing more research in, and if we can find resourcing in order to do that, we will be focusing on that in the coming years. The digital skills profile, we can point to some areas, and I'll show you kind of some of the initial findings of some exploratory studies. But I think there's definitely work to be done to kind of do a deep dive, if you like, on the digital skills needs and the digital transformation agenda within the sector. So firstly, I just want to draw your attention to a piece that came out of a study that we published earlier this year. It was an exploratory study of literacy, numeracy, and digital literacy needs in the community and voluntary sector that we carried out in partnership with our colleagues in NALA and supported by funding from the Adult Literacy for Life strategy. And it looked obviously at all areas of literacy, numeracy, but also digital literacy. And in the study, we found that almost 3 in 10 respondents have challenges with at least one digital skill. So that's people who are working or volunteering in our sector today. And as I say, almost 3 in 10 of those people have challenges with at least one digital skill. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about things like using social media, like using messaging services like WhatsApp, joining video calls, accessing the internet and sending emails, etc. So, various areas are obviously more problematic than others, but people are struggling with basic digital skills within the sector already. And that maps quite smoothly, if you like, onto the wider population as well. So I mentioned it earlier, the European Centre for the Development of Vocational Training does a kind of a skills profile every year of all of member states in the EU. And one of the areas they map every year is the level of basic digital skills in the population. And among Irish adults, there are almost 38% of people who have below basic digital skills. So kind of similar to what we find in the sector as well. And I suppose an interesting corollary to that is that 2 out of the top 4 most requested skills in online job ads last year in Ireland were digital. So, and they're quite sophisticated digital skills that are required, accessing and analyzing digital data and using digital tools for collaboration, content creation, and problem solving. So it just shows you, I suppose, the squeeze between what is being looked for from organizations and employers right across all sectors, and those of us who have, just don't have the basic digital skills yet and need support in order to get them first. So that's, if you like, the kind of baseline. In terms of looking at, taking a bit more of a look under the, I suppose, at a deeper way in terms of the digital skills required within organizations, the Wheel is involved in a European funded Erasmus project that's supported by the Commission called BASE. And this is a blueprint for advanced skills and training in the social economy. And it's a 4-year project which is focused on the skills and training needs of the social economy across Europe. And when we say social economy here, that is really synonymous with the community and voluntary sector. It includes community and voluntary groups, charities, cooperatives, social enterprises, etc. So across the nonprofit sector in Europe, this project is focusing on identifying skills gaps and training needs, establishing a competency framework, so setting out some role descriptions and the competencies that are required for those roles within our sector. And then once we've identified the skills required, the competencies and the training needs, And then the gaps in terms of training provision, the BASE project is going to be creating a number of tailored training programs to fill those gaps and to pilot them next year. And the BASE program has a particular focus, like a lot of European funded skills initiatives, on the digital and green transitions. So these are two key areas of focus. And in the project, they're areas that we have put a lot of time and effort into looking at. So in terms of the digital transition and what the BASE project and BASE research has found, we have worked with our colleagues across the 10 countries that are involved in the BASE project, and identified through focus groups and literature reviews a range of digital skills that we then put out as part of our research to managers and practitioners or workers in the sector for them to identify what their priorities were. So this is what came back from the research. So in terms of managers across the 10 countries, the top three digital skills that they prioritized were data management, digital collaboration, and diagnostic and digital strategy. And for practitioners or workers, the top three priorities were collaborating digitally, digital security, and developing an agile attitude. So you can see there as well, there are some other interesting pieces. Change management was number 5 there in terms of priorities for managers. So that sense that there is quite a leadership challenge here to digitalization. And digital inclusion itself as well came up across Europe as number 6 on the priorities for workers and number 8 for managers. It'll be interesting. I'll show you the Irish results. It came quite a bit higher in the Irish results when we look at those in a few minutes. In terms of what these digital skills actually, mean, what does it mean to have skills in terms of data management? What we have described in the project is data management is all around how you organize, how you collect, how you deal strategically with data, and how you keep it secure and compliant. And I think that's probably an area that a lot of organizations are conscious of. We collect, or we could collect, a lot of data, and how might we manage it effectively and efficiently. Digital collaboration is what we're doing here today. It's using tools to connect with, to collaborate through file sharing, virtual meetings, etc. online. We are doing a lot more of that, but are we doing it as effectively as we could? Diagnostic and digital strategy is all about how we can strategically engage with digital, decide how we operate and how we should operate within the digital environment, thinking about how it serves our social mission. So again, maybe thinking back to what I was referencing earlier, this idea that digital should be in service of our mission rather than digital itself and the tools driving how we operate. We need to figure out how we can tailor them to our own needs. And then digital communication, which again is something that we're all very familiar with, but again, how effective are we at making the most of the digital communication opportunities? So those are kind of some of the, if you like, the most prioritized or the highest priority digital skills that were identified in the study. To drill down into the Irish results just briefly, the Irish survey in particular had, as I say, quite similar in ways to the broader European-wide results. For managers, data management, digital security, and digital communication were the top 3. I think digital security, I suppose, is particularly at top of mind here because we've had some very high-profile cyber attacks in recent years. So I think keeping the data secure is something that managers are concerned about. When you look to practitioners or worker level, you have collaborating digitally, digital inclusion, and data management. And interesting, I think that digital inclusion came so much higher in the Irish context than it did in the wider European context. And perhaps that has something to do with an awareness of that digital divide and that digital skills divide that we have here in Ireland currently. Also worth noting that where there was an awareness of training, managers were likely to categorize it as inaccessible. And also there was quite a low level of awareness of suitable training in areas like digital inclusion and digital strategy. So areas that are less technical in nature. that are like inclusion and strategic digital engagement. So maybe those areas are places where there is less accessibility of training. That's one of the indications from the study. In terms of takeaways, as I say, that lack of awareness. And it's interesting that that mirrors the findings that Emily just took us through from last week's events as well. So watch out next year, because we will be piloting, along with colleagues across the 10 other countries involved, some trainings, some hopefully accessible online training, and some of that will be digital. But I just want to finish up by pointing towards some resources and some other places that you can go to find training currently. I want to reference DigComp, which is the European framework for digital competency. It's a very useful starting point. It sets out 5 areas of digital competence and an associated 21 competencies under each of the areas. It's a great way of, if you like, kind of figuring out where you yourself are in your own digital competence journey. And it's a very well respected tool. It's well established. So there'll be a link in all of these slides when you get them to do a bit of exploration yourself. You can use the DigComp to test your own skills and kind of find out where the gaps might be. And that can be useful maybe for yourself, but also for colleagues, especially if people are struggling with the basic digital skills. And as I say, 3 in 10 of our colleagues will be in that position. A more local tool that's really useful and very good is the Digital Stepping Stones tool that An Kassan developed with Accenture. And that particular tool similarly allows you to test and see where you are in your digital journey, and then points you in the direction of resources to help you bridge the gaps in your own technical digital competence. NALA have participated earlier in these events, and there is a really comprehensive and very user-friendly online resource called Learn with NALA, which includes a level 3 certificate in information and communication technologies and other digital learning opportunities. So again, a really good place to go in terms of building up that basic digital competence. So again, for yourself or colleagues, a useful starting point. If you're looking for something closer to home, or you want to maybe look for in-person training in digital, then I think the community education map from AINTIS is a really good starting point. Community education organisations right across the country are doing lots of work in this space to bridge that digital divide, and they can often tailor courses and trainings and supports to individual needs. So well worth having a look at that education map and finding a service near you. Once you're moving from those basic digital skills, then I think into the next level of your learning, eCollege is a great resource. So it's a free resource supported by SOLAS, the Further Education and Training agency. And eCollege provides a range of short online courses supported by tutors in the background. So you can actually get in touch with a tutor and they can help you with the courses as well, which is very useful in this context. And they provide a range of lots of different digital training, including the ICDL, or what might have been known as the European computer driving license years ago, is now the International Computer Driving License. They provide essentials in that and more sophisticated training on that, but everything then from artificial intelligence to cybersecurity to big data. So lots of opportunities there. They're free, they're accessible anytime. And as I say, they also are backed up by tutor support. So very useful as well for people wanting to build on the basic digital skills and take the next step. I'll also point you in the direction of our Learning Hub with the Open University. There are, again, lots of digital courses there. So again, free online courses that you can kind of access anytime. If you want to take a step then in terms of accreditation, and you're looking for something a bit more, maybe a longer or a bit more sophisticated in terms of the digital skills that you're looking to acquire, then getting in touch with your local ETB, where they have a range of skills to advance funded courses that are digital in nature. So if you chat to the enterprise engagement officer in your local ETB, you'll find that they have courses that might meet your needs. And kind of similarly at the higher education side of things, Microcreds is an initiative of the 7 established universities, and they have a number of digital courses that are available now with a significant fee subsidy at the moment. So now is the time to check them out if you've been thinking about it. And these provide, again, accredited certificates and other types of accreditation of short modules that are a lot of the time available online or in blended form, and again touch on lots of cutting edge digital skills, including the likes of AI, data, cyber, etc. And then before I finish up, just want to point as well to lots of training that's happening within our sector. You're going to hear from Liz in a few minutes. Deliver lots of really practical training in the areas that they're involved in terms of the technological solutions and how to use them best. Grow Remote is another great organization doing loads of training in areas including leading remote and hybrid teams, which is an area that I think a lot of us require support in terms of our digital skills. And then finally, colleagues of mine who are running our wheel training. Sinead Vaughan, our training manager, has a number of digital skills trainings coming up in the next few weeks. So again, worth checking out. Cybersecurity, information and communications, and social media, etc. So lots to check out there. And then next week, our Leadership Academy is holding a breakfast club on the theme of leadership and technology. So it might be a nice jumping off point. Again, another opportunity to think about strategically where your organization is in terms of technology use and how leadership might be required in order to bring you to the next stage. So that's me.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mairead. Super handy to have that range of resources, particularly the ones that are starting off point, because I think that's what a lot of organizations struggle with, is just kind of knowing where to start with all of this. So thank you for taking us through that. Liz, it is now over to you.
Excellent. I'm just going to share my screen and then we'll all be there. Okay, I hope everybody can see that.
Yep.
Excellent. So thank you very much again for joining us all this morning. It's great to be back here again. I'm going to be talking kind of through this and a few do's and don'ts. I've been in the sector with Include for coming on 10 years, and these are kind of things we've learned as we went along. So we're just going to go through them one by one, and hopefully there may be a few questions at the end. So I'm going to start off with a very general slide. What leads to success? And if you take away anything from today, from this particular presentation, it's these 3 points, and especially the piece at the bottom. It must link to your organization strategy. There is no point in doing digitalization for the sake of it. It's there, it should be linking to what your organization is doing already, whether that is fundraising, whether that is service provision, whether it is both. Don't choose once-off solutions for bits of your strategy. If you do that, you're going to end up with a hodgepodge of stuff. So it's really good when you're sitting down just to think carefully of where you're going. And we'll talk more about this as we go forward. And include all your stakeholders from the start, not at the end. It's really important for adoption. It's really important for when you're designing your system. Technology is wonderful, and everybody thinks it's all about the IT, it's all about the software, it's all about the hardware. Actually, it's far more about the people who are using those than it is about the others. The others pieces, yes, they're important, but you really need to include the people from the start. And I always use these 4 A words. Make certain it's adaptable, it's accessible, it's affordable, and it's appropriate. It's very easy to be sold fantastic systems and fantastic ways to do things, but they may not be appropriate for you. They may not be affordable to you as an organization. Some of your staff may not be able to use them, and they may send you down a cul-de-sac because they can't be changed for the future. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but those 4 A words, adaptable, accessible, affordable, and appropriate, keep those as your mantra. So the first thing I'm going to say is do future-proof. Choose a well-established provider or platform. And the reason I'm saying this, I'm going to give an example from the sector. I won't mention the organization, but we went into one organization who asked us to do a fundraising system, to discover that we were their 4th attempt in 5 years. And the last person had emigrated to Canada and hadn't even left them the keys to the system. So it's really important to think carefully, use a well-established provider platform, and think of where you want to be in the next few years. Don't do something because it's going to be an easy fix today. Think strategically, link it again, as I said, to your strategy. Obvious. I know I'm stating the obvious, but sometimes you need to do plan. So I was delighted to hear Mairead talking about the digital readiness links. They're really important. Encourage your staff to take them and encourage your staff to ask for help. Create the digital strategy. Do a SWOT analysis. So SWOT analysis is just when you're thinking of the strengths, the weaknesses, the threats, and the opportunities of doing this would be. Plan your journey in stages. And I think this is really important. Decide at the start, what are your success criteria going to be? Okay. So again, it's about figuring out how you're going to measure it. So it could be adoption. So how many of your staff are able to use the system? That should be the simplest one. How much time you're going to save, how much money you may save, improved client engagement, improved engagement with your funders. But set those criteria. And if you use the SMART piece, they should be very specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based goals. It's really good if you do this, and you can then say, well, this digital project was a success because we set these goals and we've achieved them. It's really good for funders as well, by the way. This is one I have learned over a few projects. Check if your processes are about to change. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing you should be doing is mapping your current processes anyway. How are you currently doing your work? Do they need to change in any way? Is there something you've been doing forever that perhaps could be improved? It's a great way to involve all your staff. Now, you may decide at this point, we need to make some changes. And this is where I'd say, don't digitalize until you've decided on the changes you want to make and you have them signed off by all the stakeholders. Because we've run into this in a few projects. People have tried to conflate a digital project and a process change management project in one. You really need to know how you want your processes to work before you start to do your digital journey. And I really strongly say that. Find wins for everyone. And this is back to the people, okay? You're going to have staff, you're going to have other stakeholders who are going to be asked to change the way that they work or that they interact with you. So you have to find a way that says, well, it's going to help you by, okay? So maybe you're able to say to them, well, it'll save you this amount of time a month in doing those reports. It may be saying to them, we'll be able to contact you more frequently. It may be saying to them that the organization will be able to apply for funding because we'll be able to do impact management. Okay. Think of how everybody could be a winner because you're asking everybody perhaps to make a change. Allow time for training and adoption. And again, I'm so thrilled. Mairead and I did not consult each other before this. And I know there's going to be more said about this later by Lauren, but training and adoption are huge. I can give you a lovely system and it can be for fundraising or it could be for service management. It could be for anything. And if you haven't been given the skills and the time to train and to adopt to use the system, I've wasted my time. So set aside that time. Recognize your staff may be slower doing their job for a while until they get used to the system. Appoint team champions. So you're going to have some staff perhaps who just love using the new system. Make them champions, make them people other people are happy to go to if they can't figure something out. And I always say reward adoption. Okay, so if people are using the system, reward it. Have a staff celebration for the number of records that have been entered. Have a staff celebration when the system's been up and running for the first 3 months. Reward, reward, reward. We've already talked about GDPR. I'm just going to say 4 things here, okay? Create a data consent and retention policy as a minimum. And you should be doing this as an organization anyway, even if all you're doing is putting stuff into filing cabinets, which I'm sure you're all well beyond at this stage. But if possible, take it to the next stage. Embed consents in whatever digital systems you're designing, because that makes life easier when you're trying to figure out who has consented to what. Find out where your data is being stored. Now, I think this is really important because it can vary all over the place from the software. Okay, so I can say hand on heart that I know where all the include data is being stored. It's all being stored in Europe and it's all covered by GDPR. Happy days. Okay. Any of the clients we have, we do a Salesforce CRM for, absolutely, I can say the same thing. But if you're using what I would call smaller pieces of software and the rest, just go back to the supplier and double check where is everything being stored. And the final thing I'm going to suggest is if you have several systems and you're using several systems to do the work, have a plan. So if somebody comes to you for a subject access request and demands to see everything that you are holding on all your systems, that you know how you're actually going to fulfill it. Again, with some systems, it's easier than others, but it has caught people in the past in this particular sector. Okay. Look to your sector. I am a huge enthusiast of sectors working together. And I said in the last talk I gave that we've developed systems specifically for domestic violence, for the traveller community, for the addiction community. And where it is really good is if organizations can work together on an overall digital strategy for their sector. If they can develop a community of practice that identifies common processes and data points and co-design for the future, it saves money. It means there's good standards through the sector. It means if people move from organization to organization, people are comfortable with systems. There are so many wins here. And on top of all of that, you start to gather data that you can go to government and other bodies and say, we're all working on the same systems, we're all collecting the same data set. You need to listen to us. This is where the needs are. And that is possible without all having the same system, but you've so much more going for you if you do. Ask for help. People sometimes get a bit nervous about saying they don't understand something. It's great. I'm old. I don't care any longer. I'll ask anybody for help. But please look towards other organizations. We've been given some great links today. Ask the people in those organizations for help. Ask your network organizations, see what advice they can give, and absolutely ask include. Even if we can't help ourselves, we're very good at signposting if it's something we can't help with. So use the sector, ask for help. Don't do it alone. Sometimes I think it's awful. You go into an organization and somebody has obviously had it added to their to-do list that they need to develop a digital system or strategy for an organization. And they've been left on their own to do it, you know, and no one person can do this in an organization. So set up a working group, okay, within your organization. Definitely find an executive champion, because you won't succeed unless you have somebody behind you who is supporting you at that level, whether it's the CEO or the finance director or the head of operations. You need somebody at that level to support you. Again, I'm all about the champions. So make certain you're appointing champions in each area of your work, in each office, if you're spread around the country. And I'm very enthusiastic about people finding digital partners who have worked in the sector, because they are people who will have a comfort and knowledge of the sector. Now, obviously, I'm going to mention include because we're there. But if it's something else that we don't help with, find somebody that you can get references from other people in the sector. It's really important because we do work in a different way than many commercial organizations. Don't try and do it all at once, okay? So often what happens is we have a lovely charity who gets a huge lump of money from a funder and they think, happy days, we're going to digitalize everything straight away. And especially if the funder is saying it all has to be done by the end of this year, okay? And there's suddenly this big pressure on. But the trouble with that is you get digital indigestion. People really can't adopt everything at once. It's nearly impossible. So talk to the funder, see if you can spread it out over a couple of years if it's possible. And this is a really good way of doing it. This is very high level, okay? Establish an MVP. Now, a minimum viable project is just saying it's a project. The least that needs to happen for this project to succeed is this, okay? And you may be saying it's a fundraising system. The things that need to happen for this fundraising system is we need to get our donations directly from our website into our system. We need to be able to communicate directly from our system. We need to be able to see our standing orders, and we need to be able to see our direct debits, and we need to be able to market to different levels of donors. And that would be a very good MVP to start with, okay? You develop, you test, you pilot, okay? You roll out. You then establish a new goal. What's the next thing we're going to do? And then you rinse and repeat. You bite it off in chunks. You don't try and launch an entire project to digitalize at the same time. The final thing, don't expect the system to make the coffee, okay? Digitalization is great. You will save time, you will save money, you will make things easier, you will be more GDPR compliant. But it won't solve every problem your organization has. I wish it could. It will help, but be realistic. It's only going to be one thing that helps you. So establish your goal, make certain you can measure it. You know what the success is going to look like from the start, and be realistic about that success. And just remember, it's a journey. You know, we've all started it at different times. I think I mentioned at one of the last meetings, I started off as a medieval historian many decades ago, and I've moved into the digital age and beyond it and the rest. It's a journey, step by step by step. There's great resources out there provided by the Wheel, by NALA, by UNTAS, by Solus, by ourselves, and include by so many people. Don't let it frighten you. Just take the first step. And I'm going to stop at this point and say, I don't know if there are questions yet, but just stop at this point anyway.
Thank you so much, Liz. Yeah, it's so handy to have like that very kind of practical guide roadmap to developing or implementing your digitalization process. So thank you for that. And now I'm thinking that we should have a prize internally at the Wheel for most like GIFs and memes shared via Teams. That can be our celebration aspect. So we are at question time now. So if anybody has any questions for Liz and Mairead, you can feel free to come on mic and ask. And just looking in the chat here, so Saeed asks, any digital grants available? No, Liz, are you aware of any digital?
So I'll talk briefly. So
okay.
Include doesn't actually provide grants, but there are loads, and I know there's links going out for training, digital grants, and the rest. We provide through the Tech Donations program access to heavily discounted software. And that's very, very useful. And you're more than welcome to go on the Include website and look at what's available. A lot of those are productivity tools, such as Microsoft Office, Adobe, and the rest of them. But there's plenty there. So go and have a good look. The other side is that a lot of organizations also give free software. So we build a lot of CRMs on top of Salesforce, which is very, very good. It's GDPR compliant. And they give 10 free licenses to all qualified charities and nonprofits. And most charities and nonprofits who have a charity number absolutely qualify for it. And that's a great way to get started.
Perfect. And then we're also going to be looking at different kind of funding options
Absolutely.
Later on today. Any other questions? I see that Saeed also had a question about digital transformation initiatives to support newcomers, asylum seekers, and refugees, particularly those for whom English is not a first language. And Christina shared the link to NALA's services. But if anybody else is aware of any initiatives that they want to share, please do let us know. You can pop those in the chat as well throughout the day. If we don't have it, Marie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just I saw a comment, Emily, from Pedro in the chat just around surprise that digital fundraising and all that has to do with digital money flow is not included. I presume he was referencing the findings of the research, and it is an interesting comment. I suppose I think where the base research has focused is more kind of foundational cross-cutting digital skills, and I think that's one of the elements of this area is that these digital skills kind of support many different parts of the organization. And you'll find, I think, that a good digital fundraising strategy will require, data security, data management, digital communications, and all those things, as well as then maybe more specific areas around fundraising. But I think where that research focused was in that area.
And just to say, there are a lot of tools out there for digital fundraising and the rest, and Include itself has built several that integrate in with CRM. So if it's something you're interested, Saeed, just get in contact with me and I'll see if I can give you any advice at all. It's one of the more advanced areas actually for integration between banks and websites and systems. And there's a lot that's been done to help with that.
Right.
Thanks, Liz. Marie, have you ever done any training in the wheel on digital fundraising?
Well, yes, we have. We have done in the past. I'm not aware of anything in particular coming up yet, but it is something probably to look out for in 2025 because it is an area that we have done short courses and workshops and things in. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So in the interest of time, we might just move on and then we'll have more time for questions at the end. So I'm going to pass over to Dula Toomey from the Sexual Violence Centre in Cork to talk us through her organization's digitalization journey. So Dula, over to you.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I've loved listening to everything that's gone on already, and I especially love listening to Liz from Include, because we went on a long journey with Include and we continue to do so. So just to throw that out there for transparency purposes. Sexual Violence Centre Cork has been in operation for over 40 years. And for every one of those over 40 years, it has had to account for itself and to itself. And all of those systems were paper-based. We had multiple filing cabinets. And those paper-based systems, well, they served us really well when we came to looking to go digital, because we really had our processes and stuff worked out. But they were also a nightmare as soon as the organization got busier. I have an abiding memory of that period between Christmas and New Year being in an old, really freezing building with somebody else, and we're there counting how many helpline telephone calls did we have this year, going through ledgers. And that was a reality up to maybe about 15 years ago. And we started on the digital journey with both an understanding of what it could do for us and also a very healthy suspicion of where it could go wrong. And we've actually kept both of those, and it's like a tension. And we made a couple of different attempts to go digital. And what we actually found was that because we had to bring in people from the outside to do that translation for us, we actually lost control. Literally, the data that was being collected was going into this black box of a database that we did not have true access to. And I would throw that out as one of the biggest flags. Make sure that you have control over what you have. I mean, I don't know how many websites we've lost because somebody has gone off sick and changed the password and we haven't been able to get it back. So it's security, security, security. I would actually say be paranoid about it. So having gone through, let's say, a few disasters, which we did over the years, we actually got to the point where we knew the technology was good enough to do what we wanted to do it. We knew it was secure enough. We had refused lots of attempts or suggestions that we go digital. We didn't have a trust in the platform. We didn't have a trust in lots of other things. And we hooked up with Include about 15 years ago. In truth, we did their heads in and they did our heads in. That was the human element of it. But what we did before we hooked up with them is we actually did the whole round of our sector to see what people were using. Until we came across one organization in our sector that had used Include with the Salesforce CRM. We went to see it. We actually went pressing their buttons to see how it would work. And it was only at that point that we actually decided we would approach Include ourselves. I'm really glad we waited. I'm really glad we went with them, because even in our sector, there have been data breaches. Not in our organization, but there have been in the sector. And with the work that we do, to us, it's actually unacceptable that anybody could have a fear of a breach. And in the interest of paranoia, just to let anybody know that even if there was a breach in Include and a breach in Salesforce, the way that we actually collect data and encrypt data and all kinds of things, what we actually store wouldn't be worth anything to anybody. So it's just kind of nice to know that as well. And what it has allowed us to do is has allowed us to answer questions. How much, when, all of the data that you actually need. On one level, you would think that all of that data would actually be very important for our funders. And then again, I think it's of interest that there was no person from government or government department, as it were, was able or prepared to come onto this call, because what we've actually found is our funders don't have a plan. They don't have largely a digital plan. They haven't worked out what they actually want from the people that they fund. So that can actually change literally every 3 months, every 6 months. So it's quite difficult for our sector to actually be, let's say, with the curve when that curve in and of itself hasn't been sorted yet. And we in our sector are now we are under the umbrella of a new organisation, CUAN, within the Department of Justice. And they are actually starting this digital journey, which is a very interesting one. I'd love if all of you guys were actually part of their journey, so that they could actually learn so much. But that's kind of an aside. I think that gives you a sense of where we came from on our journey, literally from paper-based. Liz, I'm sorry, we still do have some paper-based systems and always will have as long as I'm alive. We still do have some cabinets. We are really, really into the whole area of GDPR. I need to be. So we are very careful. We are very suspicious, but we needed to make that leap. And I think we were very lucky we found the final leap to make, because it's not just about the technology. It's not just about us using the technology. It is about having access to support and development from an organization that can actually allow us to keep this going over years. I mean, we actually have this system, the system we have in place, it's now 15 years old, and it's not going anywhere in a hurry. But we are going to keep it. And that's the secret of our success, not just the software, but let's say experts in software. I don't know how many other organizations there are like Include, but it definitely does have a wonderful grasp of our sector and of the voluntary and community sector. But the other thing that I actually want to talk about, because it's not only just about data and reports and accounts and whatever, but the rise of digital has made a huge difference in terms of how we communicate with the world, what we can say to the world, how we can use it to campaign and make change. That has been phenomenal. Also, the way that people make contact with us has changed hugely. Not that long ago, people only made contact on our telephone helpline. Now we have people making contact on helpline, email, all of our social media platforms, and we have a range of Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts, Facebook accounts, emails. It's like, it's just totally mushroomed. And when you're looking at challenges and opportunities, all of that, it's all full of challenges, planning challenges, operational challenges, but the opportunities are absolutely phenomenal. And I would suggest that anybody online here, anybody who's interested, have a look at our social media accounts. We would never have been able to have the voice we have or the reach we have without digital communications. And even though they too are a pain in the butt, like my Zoom dropped earlier on, you know, we can be cut off and all kinds of other things. I think it's just phenomenal. We are in an incredible era. And when we talk about digital communications, I think we're talking about them being available and accessible to way more than the 38% who might feel they have a level of digital literacy otherwise. What else shall I say about our journey? We're still on it, you know. We keep looking at all new developments, all new risks, all new opportunities. For some areas of technology, we are really late adopters. Anything got to do with information, we are the latest of adopters because we want really tried, tested, true systems. We'll take no risks that way. But we will be early adopters in terms of the communications. And COVID forced so many of us to do that. I mean, digital events. We had great time all over COVID and beyond with that. We were able to gather hundreds of people on a Zoom or a webinar who are gathered around one subject. We would never have been able to do that unless we had all collectively been plunged into it. So we were really landing into an era that's still changing. You know, I mean, you know, I was kind of looking at the news last night and looking at the AI presented to us from the Kerry politician. I mean, you know, who knows where all of that is actually going to land us. But one of the other places, or one of the other things that's absolutely huge to us, is the damage and the harms that are actually being done in those digital spaces to real people. Our clients are harmed by the actual digital developments. They're harmed because of the existence of and the creation of child sexual abuse imagery. We run a project on stalking, and you're not going to find a case of stalking where the digital aspect is not being actually used to actually harm somebody and track somebody. So I know today we're talking about the advantages. We really need to keep an eye to the disadvantages as well and chase those down. Because in a sense, if we're looking at something like stalking, where, let's say, that digital power is being used in a way it was never designed to be used, then we can harness that digital power as well to actually circumvent the digital harms. We can use that to chase down those stalkers and put them out of action. So that's kind of a cry to action, really, if there's anybody out there really interested in doing that kind of stuff. I think that's probably enough for me at this particular point.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Dola. That was very inspirational. I think it's always really encouraging to hear from our peers in the sector that have kind of undertaken this journey and see that it is achievable. And thank you for your transparency around your retention of the cabinets. And you can also include the links to your social media channels in our follow-up email so that people can have a look and see what can be done on their own channels. So thank you so much for that. And now I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lauren, who is our programs manager at the Wheel, and she's going to take us through digital funding for the sector through our Training Links program.
Thank you, Emily. And also just thanks to my colleagues who have presented before me. I'm glad to kind of note the threads that have woven themselves across our presentations, all unplanned, as Liz mentioned earlier on. So I have a couple of minutes just to talk to you, I suppose, about funding opportunities primarily through the Training Links program. So what I wanted to talk about during the presentation is just Training Links, a little bit of information on it, look at a case study that was recently funded, just to give you an idea of the types of opportunities that you can get through Training Links, next steps if this is something that speaks to you and your organisation, and how to get in touch. So what is Training Links? And I guess this is the most important takeaway from this presentation today. It's a funding programme. It focuses on workforce development. It supports networks of nonprofit organisations to come together, and they would design and deliver their own training programmes based on their own training needs. It has been running for almost 20 years now. So since 2005, we've managed to fund and support the upskilling needs of over 50,000 workers within our sector. Generally, the grants range from 10 to 50,000 euro. And that's broken down into 80% grant funding and then 20% match funding that would come from within your training organisation. So who is it for? It's for us here in our sector. So it's really broad. That covers community groups, voluntary organisations, registered charities, social enterprises. I would use the term worker, but when I use that, that includes paid staff, it includes volunteers and board members, so a reach right across the sector. It's for groups of organisations who form a training network. So what is a training network? Basically, it's a group of a minimum of 10 organisations who come together. They usually form based on kind of a common training goal or a common skills gap. They might be working within the same subsector. They could be from the same geographic area. They might have a similar business model, for example. It really varies. So there's commonality to be found in lots of different places across the sector. But the important thing is, in order to be eligible, you must have a group of 10 organisations as a minimum to be eligible to apply for Training Links, which speaks to, I guess, previous evidence of working in partnership and looking into our sector. So why would you take part? It is an opportunity to train your staff, your volunteers. It will strengthen your skills. It will strengthen your team and your organisation. It offers you the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues outside of your own organisation using that networking model. It will give you access to funding that you wouldn't be able to access just in your own organisation. So by joining a training network or forming a training network, you have new funding opportunities available to you. It can help you to identify now what your skills gap is, but it also, thinking in terms of sustaining your staff going forward, it encourages you to look towards your future skill needs. And I think it helps us to invest in the people that work within our organisations and hopefully retain them within our sector. So just for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm going to hone in on digital transformation as one of the priority areas. So that means training your workers to support the use of digital technologies in organisations. So very specific to what we're talking about today. But just to note, Training Links is really broad, intentionally so. So there's lots of different themes that you can train under. So leadership and management, green transition, developing business models, addressing current sector needs. So if you have an idea in mind that aligns with one or maybe more of these themes, it's very likely that you have the bones of an application idea starting to bubble away, at least. What I wanted to do just under the digital transformation priority area is briefly talk about a recently funded training network led by SERI, so the Social Enterprise Republic of Ireland. And Breed's contact details are on screen now. She is Breed, B-R-E-I-D, at socialenterprise.ie, and she's happy if anyone here has questions specifically about the work of SERI or their training network, you can get in touch with her. So in around, I think, July this year, the Artificial Intelligence and Social Enterprise Network was successfully funded through Training Links. SERI is their lead partner, but overall they have 24 organisations who have come together to form a training network right across the country. And they're made up of social enterprises as well as registered charities. They're all actually listed on our website, so I will share the link to the website after the presentation, and you'll be able to have a look at the breadth of organisations involved. They have an additional network supporter, so while not immediately eligible to take part in Training Links, UCC or University College Cork is supporting the work that they're doing, and they're newly established. So it's important to note that with Training Links, it might sound a little off-putting that you have to have 10 organisations to take part, but it's very possible. This network is a great example, newly established, and actually have expanded since they were awarded funding. So definitely a possibility. So what are they going to do? Over around the next 18 months, they plan to equip social enterprises with the necessary skills to adopt and use AI within their operations. So they have a couple of ways that they're going to do it, and a couple of things that they would like to achieve by the end of the programme. All of their learners after their Training Links programme will be able to define key AI concepts, understand how AI can be applied to streamline operations, enhance decision-making and improve service delivery within their social enterprises. And they're also going to look at the privacy and ethical aspects of AI. They're really ambitious. The network aims to provide training to 600 attendees over the time of their programme. They're going to do this a couple of different ways. So through customised workshops and seminars, through role-specific training for the immediate AI tool application, specialist modules for leaders. They are going to offer follow-on sessions for ongoing skills development, which is really important because they're thinking of the now, but also into the future. And they're also going to offer access to an online community of social enterprise leaders using AI. So all very new. And I'm really excited to see how they will get on over this year and into next year. So just to kind of bring us back as I wrap up my presentation, if what you've heard about Training Links or what the network that SERI are leading, if that's interesting to you and you think this could be something for our organisation in terms of a funding opportunity, we would suggest you plan in advance. So get ahead of the call opening up, identify your skills gap, consider what your training needs are, be really practical about your internal resources. Can you commit the time? Would you consider yourself a lead as a part of a training network, or maybe a partner as a part of a training network? You can engage with existing networks, and that's a really good idea. We do find that people come back and reapply to Training Links. So if they've had a positive journey, a successful outcome, they might then build on what they've achieved first time around and come back with another application. You can connect with new contacts and colleagues, and we have a way that we'd like to support you to do that. It is by completing our expression of interest form. It's really basic. It's essentially the wheel facilitating an information exchange. So by completing it, you're consenting to your details being circulated to the other respondents. That's shared in advance of the funding call opening. And it just gives you, I suppose, the motivation and the opportunity to reach out to people who you might consider forming a network with. So all of these links will be popped into the chat box at the end. And then finally, just to give you an idea of the programme this year, so the scope and the scale of it, we had a fund of €255,000 that came from the National Training Fund. We received 38 applications. It's very competitive. We had a success rate of about 1 in 4. So this year we were able to fund 10 applicants, so 10 new training networks. There's over 140 organisations and growing within those 10 successful training networks. They received grants ranging from 10 to €50,000, and they're currently active. So running over an 18-month period from summer this year towards January 2026. These are some of the links. So the slides are going to be shared afterwards, but I'll paste them into the chat box now for anyone who's really eager or interested. I'm really happy to take your questions today, or if anything comes up, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll get back to you there. Thanks, Mel.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. It's really great for people to have a tangible funding resource on their radar, I think. And just before we hand over to Christina, there is a specific question around training links that I might just throw at you now. So just around, is there any requirements for joining networks?
So there are eligibility criteria for applying. So I can point to those. I'll pop them into the chat box and point to where they are in the program overview, but they are quite broad. So if you work within the sector as a paid staff or volunteer, generally you're eligible to apply. I guess the big kind of ticket item is you need to be a part of a network that has a minimum of 10 members.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Lauren. So, Christina, it is over to you to talk us through some EU funding options for digitalization.
Yes, I'm happy to do so and open up a completely new world after all the speakers we heard. And that is the world of EU funding. And I'm sure that this can only be a very short glimpse. So I will just give you an overview what is there and just recommend a few programs that could be interesting for you and your organization, and to fund the digitalization or the capacity building for your organization. But again, this is just a few options. There are more opportunities out there, and you're always very welcome to reach out to us at Access Europe, and Emily and me to talk about more opportunities. So as a first step, I would like to start with a question why the EU has an interest actually in funding digitalization. And the goal for the EU, of course, is to build a more inclusive digital society. So this includes bridging the digital divide, providing all citizens with equal access to digital school tools, high-speed internet, so the whole infrastructure topic is here also covered, and digital skills. And one of the most important policies on this topic is the Digital Education Action Plan that you might have heard of. And you see it also here in numbers. And we heard it before from Arid. The target for the EU is to ensure that 70% of adults have basic digital skills by 2025. And that is very soon. So to reach those goals, the EU is providing funding. And that is interesting for our sector, because those funds support the development of digital skills, trainings, workshops, everything that we heard before, or parts of it. Let's say parts of it. I chose 3 EU funding programs that could be of interest for you and for your organization. And I would start with Erasmus+. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this program, maybe have participated, received funding from it already. It is the EU program for education, training, youth, and sport. So it supports personal, educational, professional development in those areas. And you see it here, especially with the new program cycle. Erasmus Plus has a strong focus also on digital transformation, among other priorities, of course, and you see it here in those 4 horizontal priorities. But like the digital transformation is one of the most important. That practically means for you that it can fund projects that enhance digital skills or promote digital education, foster digital innovation, and maybe this is also interesting, deliver capacity building training for your staff or your volunteers, for your target groups, your communities. I will touch on 2 opportunities, the mobility projects and the partnerships for cooperation, very, very quickly. There's a lot more information out there, and I can only recommend to contact Leargas, which is the Irish National Contact Point for this EU program. They have an excellent team and excellent supports and more information on all of this, what I'm saying about Erasmus Plus here, so they can definitely help you out more. Just to mention those 2 possibilities, mobility projects and partnerships for cooperation. So if you say, okay, probably most interesting for me for now is to gain more knowledge on digitalization, to equip my employees with new digital competencies, to adopt best practices, then mobility projects could be interesting for you. Here it is kind of an exchange program. If you want to, you can send your staff, your volunteers, young people, whoever like your target group is, to travel to another country and to work, train, learn in exchange with another organization. So that is like one opportunity. In very short, the other opportunity are those partnerships for cooperation. There are bigger and small scale partnerships. And here, in collaboration with an organization or with organizations from different countries, you actually develop and implement innovative digital practices. So these can be digital tools, platforms, online courses. So resources for you or for your target group. You can create those digital resources in the frame of this project. You can deliver training for your staff, for your for your staff, your volunteers to build digital skills. So this can be interesting, especially also for smaller organizations to start with. Again, please check the website by Leargus or just get in contact with them differently. We will share those information, also contact information in the follow-up. Two more programs that I picked today is Creative Europe and the Digital Europe program. Creative Europe is the EU program supporting cultural and creative sectors. So in general, they fund cultural cooperation, networking, training, and more, of course. This includes also, for example, news, media sector, journalism, and so forth. So this might not be of interest for all of you, maybe just for some of you, but as they have a very interesting opportunity at the moment, and that is an open call, I decided to include the program here today, and it is under the cross-border strand. It's called Media Literacy Project. This is an open call running until the 6th of March. You see it here. And here you partner up with at least 3 organizations from different countries. If you say, okay, our objective, our goal for our organization at the moment is knowledge sharing, exchange on media literacy policies and practices. If you say this is interesting for me, check out this call. This could be something for your organization. Again, there's an excellent national contact point here in Ireland, the Creative Europe desk. I will also put the link in the follow-up email. And the EU is running a lot of info sessions on current open calls by Creative Europe. There are more open calls by Creative Europe. I didn't want to include them all here. They are also in the news and the journalism area, so check those out. And just as a last one, it had to be mentioned, Digital Europe, the program. It is the biggest one that is driving the digital transformation in Europe. However, and I have to mention that, it is suited for organizations only with very high capacity. So this is not for something to start out. If you want to start out, do this with Erasmus+. But if you have, let's say, the resources, the knowledge, then, and maybe also research capacities, then I would recommend to check out Digital Europe. You can see it here. I listed some of those focus areas. It's very like technological. So it's cybersecurity, it's artificial intelligence, it's advanced computing, digital skills, and so forth. And it's also bridging gaps between research and the market, businesses, public administrations, and so forth. So you see, this is like huge consortia. However, if you say this is interesting and I would like to go for that, there are current open calls, and I will again put those links in the follow-up email, and you can learn more about this program. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is only a short or quick glimpse of what is out there. And if you would like to know more about EU funding for digitalization or EU funding in general, you're very welcome to reach out to us, to the Access Europe team. We provide information, resources, trainings, events, help desk support, network building opportunities all around EU funding. We have a monthly newsletter, we have our website, we have a YouTube channel with recorded webinars on topics around EU funding. So just reach out, we're here and happy to help you. And that's it.
Lovely. Thank you, Christina. And just wanted to point out that we have our Access Europe Showcase, which is our annual kind of event happening on the 21st of November, which is an opportunity to meet those national contact points like Leargus. And I see that Gemma from Leargus is actually here with us today. So hi, Gemma. To meet Gemma and other colleagues working on EU funding programs in person and ask them your questions about how you can get started with EU funding for your organization. So we can, again, include that in our increasingly long follow-up email. So I think that's all of our guest speakers for the day. So again, we can open up the floor to questions. If anybody wants to come on mic for questions for any of our speakers? And in the meantime, I will have a look in the chat. So it looks like Caroline got some good suggestions from Mairead and another Caroline on supports for older people looking to get online. So that's some good peer knowledge exchange there. And a question from Damien about Erasmus Plus projects. That was answered by Gemma. Okay. So if there aren't any other questions, then we can wrap it up. And to close out the event, what we wanted to do was hear from you about what your next steps are going to be in terms of digitalization before January 1st. So we gave people kind of I guess, a timeline to sort of light a fire under you. So we have a Menti poll here. So what's the first or next step you're going to take towards digitalization by January 1st? So you can scan the QR code here to answer the question, or you can join at www.menti.com using the code 39312839. And Christina will pop that link in the chat as well. So I'll just give people a minute to scan that QR code, and then I can share the screen so we could see the Menti results coming in. Okay, so I'll just go over to Menti now. Okay, great. So we have a very practical one, creating a digital strategy. I assume that's what that means. So looking at policy, assessing where we are, understanding the data landscape, looking at a review and ongoing steps if you've already started your digitalization journey, engaging stakeholders, doing a cybersecurity audit, understanding it. Yeah, great. So really hopeful that today has given everybody, if not a jumping off point, then just some ideas on where they can go and how they can kind of develop and expand their existing digital strategy. And hopefully it's been encouraging and that you're kind of aware of kind of world of supports that are out there for you. So I'm going to stop sharing that now. But yeah, just in terms of next steps, we will share the follow-up email with the recording and all of these links and resources with you in this week. And then, as I said, we're going to work on compiling that final report with all of our findings and recommendations for actions to support the community sector in this area. So I just want to give a big thank you to our guest speakers, to Liz and to Dola, and to my colleagues Mairead and Lauren and Christina for pulling this event together today. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here. So thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.